Free speech is very topical at the moment, so I thought I'd say a few words about it. I am going to try and keep these videos to every couple of weeks, and didn't quite happen over the last couple of weeks, but I am going to try to do that. I'm going to try and mix it with discussions with people. I do have a few very interesting people lined up, and with articles. And I want to start this by saying a huge thank you to everyone who has become a paid subscriber on my Substack. I will put a link to that Substack beneath this video. And if you can, please do. One of the things I've covered recently, the rampant sexual crime against women and girls across Europe, thanks to mass immigration from cultures and societies where women are less than cattle. I've completed that, although didn't cover every country in Europe, so I might address it again, particularly with where the UK is concerned, because again, I luckily for me, I don't spend a great deal of time on social media, but I obviously go in and out, and I saw today yet more instances of women being raped in the UK by illegal immigrants staying in 4-star hotels, by the way, while we are being taxed to the hilt to pay for it, and while the elderly in this country, for instance, are having their benefits cut. I could spend all day talking about that, but I won't. So if you can, please go onto my Substack and follow the next thing I'm doing, which is, if you're an American particularly, and I know I have a lot of friends in America, and I'm really grateful for that. I will be doing and have started articles on Islam in America. Cannot tell you how many times Americans have told me that we here in Europe are on the brink of catastrophe with Islam. That may be true, but it's not untrue for America as well. And I've listed various aspects of it that I want to cover in articles over the next few months. The name of my Substack is In Defense of Democracy, and it was the name of a book that I wrote. And anyone who knows anything about me has followed me over all these years, and I know there are many of you, and I'm so grateful to you. You've stuck with me from the very beginning, from Sharia watch days, even going back to One Law for All, right up until now, stuck with me. Thank you. You should know, and you will know, that democracy is what I believe in. I have always said so. And many people who stood with me over the years also said so. I've recently discovered that not everyone meant it, but that's another matter. I do mean it. And democracy means democracy, even for the people I don't particularly like. It is literally the will of the people. That's what the Demos Kratos, that's what it's derived from, the will of the people. And the system is supposed to work a bit like this. The people choose someone from among the people to get together, and several people from among the people to get together and to make the rules that we will all live under. If we don't like the rules they make, we get rid of them at the next vote and put someone else in who will make rules that we like. And the process goes on and on and on. In order for that to work, the people who put themselves forward to be voted on, to be elected or otherwise, they have to be able to speak. They have to be able to say what they think. They have to be able to tell the voting public who they are. That's the point. And if they can't do that, then the whole system doesn't work. And that's where free speech comes in. And free speech is a civil right. The purpose of it is, as I said, for people to stand for election and to be able to tell you what they really think. It's also so that we can hold the powerful to account. So if we elect somebody and we don't like them, we don't like how they turn out, or they didn't keep their word, or they're not quite who they told us they were, we have to be able to criticize them. We have to be able to say so. We have to be able to call them out. It's our civil right. living in a democracy, to be able to criticize those who make the rules, those who rule over us. That's the point of it. It's a civil right, the most fundamental civil right, I would argue. And it's what I can see lately is it's very topical, largely because of the recent murder of the American activist Charlie Kirk. And I again, just glancing in and out of social media, I can see a lot of people calling for free speech. And there was a big rally in London just the weekend gone, which the organizer Tommy Robinson called a rally for free speech. But I'm not sure, and what I'm about to say probably won't be popular with some people, but what's new? I'm not sure that everyone who is or who has over the years advocated free speech actually believes it. Now, J.K. Rowling posted something on Twitter a few days ago, and I saw a lot of people reposting it. Then if you don't, and one of the things she said was, if you don't support free speech for your opponents, then you're illiberal, I think was the word she used. And it's been said many, many times over the years, if you don't support free speech for your opponent, then you don't support free speech. And we have this drift, sometimes the right is on the ascendancy and the left going down. Other times the left is on the ascendancy and the right sort of getting crushed. And on each time, when it drifts from one to the other, each time the side in power calls for the removal of free speech rights of the side not, the side on the bottom. So I'll give you an example. When the left is in power, I don't necessarily mean official political power, but when it controls the institutions, as well as being in political power, when it controls the institutions like the media. Well, what we've seen over the last decade or so has been a left-wing dominance and anything they don't like. So if you talk about immigration and wanting to close the borders, which I do, it's hate speech. It's not free speech, it's hate speech. You'll hear that a lot from the left. And funnily enough, there's some of that coming from the right now that the right seems to be on the ascendancy. They're calling, I saw Pam Bondi get into trouble over this, talking about hate speech. I also heard Donald Trump use the phrase to an Australian reporter, that he was accusing that Australian reporter of using hate speech against him. So now you have the right. No, right, that's only two examples. But it is two important examples. And I think Pam Bondi sort of pedaled backwards a little bit on it. But they're already starting to use the word hate speech. And this is for people who criticize Charlie Kirk, for instance. So, as we used to say, the left calls speech they don't like, they call it hate speech. And I have a feeling that the same is going to start happening now that the right is ascending. They're going to start calling left-wing criticisms of them and their representatives, their podcasters, their politicians, will start calling the left hate speech. And it really is the same thing. So let me just be really clear about a few things. The ability to criticize people is free speech. So let's put it into the context of Charlie Kirk, for instance. People who criticize him, people who don't like him, have the right to criticize him and have the right to not like him. Above all, they have the right to tell the truth about things that he may have said. I am seeing from people on the right this celebration of critics of Charlie Kirk losing their jobs. Now, for years, we objected to people losing their job for holding conservative or right-wing views. And people were, and probably still are. I'm sure they still are losing their jobs for that. If you are calling for left-wingers to lose their jobs because they criticize Charlie Kirk, then that's not, don't call yourself an advocate for free speech. It's not free speech, it's revenge. You're looking for revenge. And maybe that's perfectly understandable. I mean, I was on the receiving end of left-wing bull for a long, long time. But I'm still not, even though I took all that from the left, I'm still not going to turn around and call for the left to left-wingers, call for left-wingers to start losing their jobs now as revenge, because I believe in free speech. I believe in it because I believe in democracy. And you have to, and I think we should be very, very careful, because it rises. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. Your enemy will rise to power at some point again. And then their enemy will rise to power at some point again. And this side will punish that side, and that side will punish that side and take away the rights. This side will take away that side's rights, and vice versa. Unless you have those rights solidified, they will be taken from you, given back to you, taken from you, given back to you. You lose your job, you either have these rights or we don't. And I see constantly, so I had somebody yesterday actually condemn someone to lose their job because they didn't show sufficient, they didn't celebrate Charlie Kirk's death. And while I'm on it, let me just say a word about that. That is horrifying. If you're going to celebrate his death, it is horrifying. But it is still free speech. Sorry. But it is. But regardless, this person said that he said that this, he was celebrating someone losing their job. And I responded to them saying, I don't know what this person said, but it is, like it or not, it is freedom of speech to criticize him. He replied saying to me what the person had said, who had lost their job, that he didn't celebrate Charlie Kirk's death. It was nothing ghoulish and horrible like that, but he didn't show sufficient compassion in his comments on Charlie Kirk. Just take that in for a minute. This is like 1984. You have to show sufficient. So I replied saying, well, how exactly are we now compelled to show a certain level of compassion for someone? And who measures that level of compassion? Who decides whether you're compassionate enough? This is controlling your emotions. It may be horrifying to celebrate someone's death, as some of these ghouls are doing on social media. I'm perfectly aware of that. But no matter how immoral and disgusting it might be, like it or not, it is free speech. I would calling them out on it and calling them disgusting, immoral fiends is also free speech. Telling the truth is probably the most important thing that's protected by free speech. It really, really is. And I have seen people, again, I'm not doing this video about Charlie Kirk, but it's just a prime example because it's so topical, and it's where this debate is at the moment. I have seen people, and I've been one of them, objectively telling the truth about some of the things that he said and getting the most ferocious punishment for it. They're not celebrating his death. They're not condemning him. They're just telling the truth. And it absolutely reminds me of all those years when I told the truth about the teachings of Islam, what was written in the Quran, what was recorded in the Hadith, the truth. Anyone could look at it. Anyone could pick it up and read it and know it was the truth. And I was threatened, harassed for years for it, even though it was objectively true. And I can see a lot of the same thing is happening now. Expressing an opinion based on the truth is also freedom of speech. No matter how immoral that opinion or how much it offends your moral sensibilities, it is still freedom of speech. What about lying? Well, lying about people is one of the few instances where free speech in democracies is controlled and curtailed. It's a civil matter, not a criminal matter. It's defamation. So if someone in public tells outright lies about you, that is a civil wrong and is actionable in civil law. It's not a crime, it's a civil matter. And rightly so, I would say. The only problem is that access to your ability, if you like, to hold someone accountable for defaming you is very, very limited. I have been on the receiving end of defamation countless times. And I went to a solicitor to see what I could do because I was a little bit tired of being called a Nazi in public when I have openly, repeatedly, and consistently opposed anything Nazism or anything like it. I was essentially told by the solicitor that unless I have 6 figures in my pocket, which I don't, unless I am willing to give unscrupulous newspapers the prompt, the motivation to go through my life with a fine-tooth comb to find out anything I may have ever done that was slightly less than admirable, then I should shut up. And not just that, but the people I care about, my family and others. If I don't want unscrupulous newspapers going through their lives and finding out anything they've ever done that they might not want the whole world to know about, then I should shut up. So that's not access to defamation laws, and or you know, to get justice for when you were lied about and wronged. It needs to be, in my view, particularly for people who are involved in politics, and particularly during an election time, which is often the times when I stood for election here in Hartlepool, a local election, and Labour put out a leaflet essentially saying that I was BNP, even though I've never been a member of the BNP, I've never been involved with the BNP. And I took this leaflet to the Electoral Commission and said, look, it's an election, an official, a formal election period. I'm a candidate, and Labour, who's also standing against me in this election, are lying, flat out, provably, observably lying on an election leaflet. And I was told by the Electoral Commission that it was free speech. No, it's not. No, it's not. Democracy can't function like that. You can't just lie provably. You can express an opinion about your opponent, but that opinion has to be based on a fact that you can prove, that is provably true. It is provably true that I've never been a member of the BNP, that I've never been involved in the BNP. That's provably true. And yet they said so on an election leaflet during an election, a formal election period, and there was nothing I can do about it. That has to stop, because that is twisting democracy. It's destroying the very principle of democracy in the first place, which is that the elector knows who you are. The elector must be going to the ballot box on election day and voting based on the truth. And if major political parties like Labour are allowed to flat out lie during an election period on an election leaflet, they are interrupting, skewing, destroying the very freedom of speech that the democracy is based on. So to me, there should be strict laws because the press can't be relied upon to tell the truth. We know this. It's incompetent and inept for the most part, which is why I've often wondered why both the left and the right think the media is biased against them. It's been an interesting thing to me over the years. And I think I've figured out the answer. It's just because it's just so incompetent. They can't get anything right. The standard of journalism is so incredibly low. Even just in the last 20 years, it has collapsed. But having said that, there is definitely a bias against the right. However, with the right in the ascendancy, I expect that might change and we'll start to see a bias against the left. It's just up, down, and neither of these sides, when they come to power, actually practice what they preach when it comes to free speech. Now, inciting violence is the criminal exception to freedom of speech, and rightly so. And this has also come up quite a bit in recent weeks after the murder of Charlie Kirk. Immediately, and it's coming from both sides, by the way, immediately after he was murdered, in that just horrifying, and I saw a clip of the shooting before he was even pronounced dead, publicly pronounced. I think it was Donald Trump that confirmed that he had died on Truth Social. But before that even happened, when people were still saying pray for him and he's fighting, etc., I saw the clip of that shooting, and it was absolutely horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. And there was no way. I mean, I'm no doctor, obviously, but the first thing I thought when I saw it was, there's no way he's coming back from that. Nobody is surviving that shot. It was absolutely brutal. And I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't actually already gone before he left that university in Utah. It was absolutely brutal, and seen, I understand, by his wife and children. I mean, this is absolutely abhorrent. But before anybody even knew who had shot him, who had committed this horrific, evil act, it was being blamed on the Democrats by Donald Trump. This is very important. I'm no fan of the Democrats. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump either. But this is both very irresponsible and it is wrongly associating political opposition or criticism with encouraging murder. So they seem to be saying, some of the Republicans, what they seem to be saying is, and I've heard people say, calling the Democrats a terrorist organization, and they need to be banned, and left-wing organizations need to be banned. The same people will then talk about free speech 5 minutes later. You have the right to criticize someone, but if someone else picks up a gun and shoots at someone, the fact that you criticize them does not make it your fault. It's the fault of the person who picked up the gun and shot them. There should be more responsible rhetoric from both sides. So when the left calls you a Nazi because you don't want open border immigration, they need to be called out on that. But are they responsible for getting you shot? Is that really the society we want to live in? Part of the way we would solve this is by regulating journalism, because it can't be trusted by itself. I've said this for years, especially during election periods. Journalism should be regulated. Every single candidate, if a reporter or a journalist speaks about that candidate has to have, in the same article, a right to respond and the same length You can't have 4 or 5 paragraphs calling them a Nazi and then one line, "I'm not a Nazi." You have to give them a right to respond to this stuff. But at the same time, the left will call you a Nazi, and at the same time, the right is then saying that anyone who criticizes Charlie Kirk or someone who holds his views is somehow responsible for his death. It's exactly the same attack coming from both sides at each other, and neither of them are really any commitment to freedom of speech. So what's supposed to happen now? Is everyone supposed to shut up? Is no one on the left allowed to criticize the right, and no one on the right allowed to criticize the left in case someone happens to pick up a gun and shoot someone? The only person responsible for murdering Charlie Kirk is the murderer of Charlie Kirk. Other people have to be allowed to speak. They have to be. This ban the Democrats. And as for inciting violence, several people were calling for war. We're going to war. That's you can't criticize other people for inciting violence when I think morally it's inciting violence, perhaps not legally, but morally. Isn't there a question around calling for war? Isn't there at least a debate to be had about is that inciting violence? Personally, I don't think it is, but it's a discussion that needs to be had. And the thing is, it's coming from both sides. The criticism is coming from both sides. The condemnation, the left wanted to ban right-wing organizations. Now the right wants to ban left-wing organizations. That's my point. And it happened immediately after Charlie Kirk was shot. People on the right calling for people on the left to lose their freedom of speech. And the same people will be copying and pasting J.K. Rowling's post about if you are not in favor of free speech for your opponents, basically you're not in favor of free speech. Inciting violence is a tricky one. And I would say that it has to be direct and intentioned incitement against an individual, which is largely where the law falls on this issue. If someone is standing with a gun in their hand, let's again, it's the perfect example, isn't it? Let's again say someone was standing near Charlie Kirk when he was on stage and had a gun in their hand, and someone went up and said, "Shoot him. You really should shoot him. He's a nasty piece. You shoot him. The world would be a much better place if he wasn't there." And riling them and encouraging them to kill someone. If that person then said, "You know what, yeah," and then shot Charlie Kirk, then there is some responsibility on the other person because they incited it. Directly encouraging someone to commit a crime against someone else, a violent crime against someone else, is inciting violence. And it's the criminal exception to freedom of speech, and rightly so. But it's not the same thing as criticizing someone. And certainly not the same thing as telling the truth about them, what they believe in, and responding to it critically. That's not inciting violence. Directly encouraging someone to kill them, that's inciting violence. And it just has to be consistent. It has to be for your opponents as well as for those you approve of. It just has to be. Or else you're not standing on principle. Don't say you believe in free speech if what you're actually looking for is revenge and dominance over your opponents, the ability to take away the rights of your opponents. If that's what you want, say so. But just don't call yourself an advocate for free speech if you want other people to lose their rights because you don't agree with them. People are even more than people encouraging violence or calling it war, or is people losing their jobs. This is happening quite a lot, I hear, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's horrific murder. It's a difficult one, and I know that for years people on the right were losing their jobs for their opinions. But now people on the left are losing their jobs for their opinions. First question is, do we want a society where you can lose your job for your opinion? I don't. I don't think people should lose their job for their opinion. Because you won't always be the one in charge. You won't always be the one with the upper hand. But if you have a society where nobody can lose their job because of their political opinion, then if the power shifts, then you're safe, aren't you? Because you've solidified it. You've made it so that nobody can lose their job for their political opinion. So if you're now calling for your opponents to lose their jobs, the chances are things are going to spin around again, and then you might lose your job, and you've no real right to complain because you wanted a society where people can lose their jobs for their opinions. You wanted that person to lose their job. So when it comes back around at you, don't complain, because that's what you wanted. That's how it is. Nobody should lose their job for their opinion. Employment law obviously comes into this quite significantly. Do we have protections from unfair dismissal from our jobs? Yes, and we should. And one of those reasons that one of the things that should amount to unfair dismissal is an opinion expressed in our private time. If you're in work storing up all sorts of animosity and causing a load of tension and stuff with your colleagues, that's a different matter. But if you express an opinion in your private time, it should have no bearing on your job. Again, a criminal offence such as inciting violence. So let's say, for instance, if I go on social media and say I didn't like Charlie Kirk, he was whatever reason a person might cite for not liking him, that's no reason to lose your job. If you go on social media and say, I hope so and so gets killed, just like Charlie Kirk did, that's a criminal offence. You're inciting violence. That's different. But if you are simply saying, I didn't like Charlie Kirk, or even as ghoulish and immoral as it is, that I'm glad he's dead, that's not inciting violence. And you shouldn't lose your job over it. Be very, very careful what you wish for, because when it comes around again, it might be your job. So do we have employment laws that protect us from unfair dismissal, or don't we? I suggest we do, and we should keep them, because we never, ever know the minute when it might be our turn, when we have said the wrong thing. Do we have employment laws or not? It brings up a few factions as well. The right of employers to hire and fire whoever they like for whatever reason. That's I suppose, a right-wing view. The more left-wing view would be that employees have rights. And I, on this one, lean towards employees have rights. We have to have rights. And one of those rights, once again, should be we can express an opinion if we want to. It is a very, very difficult topic, and I actually hesitated a little bit even to discuss this. But what the hell? Why not? There are a few people talk about, I wanted to before I finish, to address as well, the freedom of speech is not freedom from consequences. Okay, I understand that as well. But again, if the consequence you're talking about is losing your job, then I go back to either we have employment rights or we don't. I would hope that we do. If the consequence is being arrested, then that should only be if you commit a criminal offence. We should not be arresting people who haven't committed criminal offences, and the criminal offence should only be inciting violence, which is generally what the situation is across the democratic world. There are, though, personal consequences, and that's fair. So, for example, if you have a political opinion and express it, and a friend of yours is absolutely horrified by your opinion, The consequence may be that you lose your friend. And that's not a free speech infringement. That's your friend's right to associate with whoever they want to associate with. And the same thing applies across social media. Being blocked on Twitter is not an infringement of your free speech. It's the person who blocked you exercising their freedom to not have to listen to you. I block people on Twitter all the time, couldn't care less. I'm not, if I was trying to get you kicked off Twitter, then I'm trying to infringe your freedom of speech. But blocking you, it's my freedom. I don't want to listen to you. If you have a partner or a husband or a wife and you are constantly telling them how awful they are and how useless they are and how ugly they are and all these, a whole list of horrifying things you could say to your partner, that the consequence of that is likely that you'll end up single. And that's fair, because anyone with a morsel of self-respect is not going to stay around to be treated like that. So that's a consequence. So I get what people are saying when they say it's not without its consequences. It's not. But those consequences should not necessarily be losing your job or getting arrested. Because if it is, then we don't have freedom and we don't have democracy. And I am an advocate for democracy. I believe in democracy. And to be clear about democracy as well, it does not stop on election day. Election day is only the way the people express who it is they want to make the rules, who it is they want to lead them. Democracy is what happens before and after the election. The election is only one significant but minor at the same time aspect of it. It's only the method by which we choose who leads us. It's not democracy itself. For instance, if you elect someone who then takes away everyone's rights, then democracy ceased the moment that elected person takes away all your rights. Democracy is a continuing, it's a way of life. It does not stop at election day. Hamas was elected. Does anyone really think that Hamas is democratic, or that everything they do has democratic legitimacy because they were elected? It's nonsense. Democracy is how we live our lives. It is the very fundamental principle that human beings should not be ruled over by someone to whom they have someone who is in no way accountable to the people who are ruled by them. It's a living, breathing idea. It's an aspiration. We never get it perfect. We're humans. We never get anything perfect. But it is rule by the people. And so that an assurance that they cannot be ruled by some tyrant who acts in their own interest and never in the interest of the people they govern. To fundamentally have a democracy, everyone has to have equal rights. Everyone has to have the right to speak. Everyone has to have the right to express their wish on election day. And after the election, whoever they elect has to maintain those democratic values of equal rights for everyone, rule of law, freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of thought. All of those things must be in place for a democracy to exist. And after someone is elected, they are obliged by the fundamental requirements of democracy to keep all of those rights in place and to be accountable and to be removable by the people. It is the people who decide. That's democracy, and that's what I believe in. And it cannot exist if we don't have freedom of speech. And freedom of speech can't exist unless we afford it to those who oppose us, to those we may absolutely find abhorrent and immoral, such as those celebrating the murder of a young father. You may find them abhorrent, but it's their right. Because I've got to tell you, some of what you're going to say is abhorrent to them. So that's where the upper hand comes in. Whoever has the upper hand decides who gets free speech or not, based on what they think is apparent. So be very careful what you wish for regarding freedom of speech. I'm going to talk about another issue that just keeps going and going and going and going. And I refer to it briefly, which is the situation in Israel. I'm hoping to have a guest that you will find very interesting and enjoyable in a couple of weeks' time. But in the meantime, thank you. Thank you to everyone who is a paid subscriber. Look out for my articles on Substack about Islam in America, and I shall see you in a couple of weeks. Take care.